Hello and welcome to another episode of the Happy Head podcast. Now, if you don't know by now, shame on you. My name is Paul Wilson and I'm your host. And I'm giggling like a 2-year-old because we were talking, my guest and I were talking just before I went on air. And I do this thing where before we start talking, I have like a 30-second of silence for I do the editing and stuff like that. And I was doing various things. I could see out the corner of my eye that Jenny was kind of giggling at me, doing all these funny signs and stuff. So welcome, Jenny Bailey, Tales from Mother Earth. I'll just say that she's got a very weird name, but she loves it. So what am I to say? How are we, Jenny?
Very well, thank you, Paul. Lovely to be here and share this with you. How are you doing?
I am very well, thank you very much. And it's just really bizarre because people talk about social media and the internet has been a really negative thing. And yet I love it because on Sunday, I was in Texas. I was on a podcast at 5 o'clock my time, at lunchtime his time, with a guy called Brandon, who lives in North Texas. And now I'm talking to Jenny, who lives literally 15 minutes up the road from me in a reasonably fast car. It's just, it shows you the flexibility and the amazing whatever it isness of the interweb. I just love it. It's brilliant.
Right, it's the scope, isn't it? It is amazing. It takes us all by surprise, and how interconnected we can all be these days. It's fantastic.
Which, when we kind of get into what you're here to talk about today, is a bit of an incongruence, isn't it? In the sense that when we talk about environment and looking after the world and all this kind of thing, the internet does consume worldwide, I guess, a huge amount of energy. So in one sense, it's kind of a negative, but in the other sense, it's a really positive thing because otherwise people like yourself and others wouldn't be able to get your message out.
I think you're right, actually. I mean, there is a huge amount of energy in it, but I think that's outweighed by the good that it can do. It can connect us. It can open our eyes to wondrous things that maybe we hadn't thought about, maybe we hadn't considered. And I mean, during this time of the pandemic, for instance, I know a lot of people have been looking online and getting comfort and solace from images of nature, bird watching and that sort of thing, because they've been needing that connection with nature more so than ever, especially if they've been going through the lockdown, for instance, and they've been in apartments and they haven't been able to actually go and find some green space or go for their walk. They've turned to the internet for those connections, and there's science there that actually says, obviously the best benefits for nature is actually getting out in there and breathing in the fresh air and walking through the woods and that kind of thing and experiencing the sights, the sounds, the smells, the textures of nature. Yes, that is far and absolutely the best way of doing it. But there's also comfort that can come from, and peace in a way that can come from actually looking at images and hearing birdsong, for instance, as well. Very much so.
I love the phrase forest bathing. Before I kind of found out what it meant, I had this image of people in their sort of swimming trunks and bikinis in lush ancient forest, kind of doing some new agey dancing around and rubbing themselves up against trees and things, which isn't too far from the truth. Because like you were just saying, it's about getting out into nature. Forest bathing is specifically going into ideally ancient woodland and just kind of like letting yourself go and being one with everything that's going on in the woods.
Yeah, there's different degrees of it, I guess, really. I mean, forest bathing can be just going for a walk in the woods, isn't it? Just going with a friend or taking your dog for a walk and just experiencing that abundance of nature around you. Listening to the wind in the trees, looking at the leaves, and there's a lot of comfort that can come from that, I think, as well. Or you can go to extremes, I guess, really, and just lie down amongst it and take it in.
Get naked and hug a tree. There's an image.
Now, I don't think there's wrong in hugging trees. Nothing wrong in hugging trees. I'm not sure about getting naked and hugging trees.
I know.
We'll pass on that.
Now, in Kent, we're really lucky because we've actually got lots of woodland and quite a few bits and pieces of ancient woodland. But I've been reading recently a lot about the Middle Ages, well, what they call the Dark Ages, from kind of like the year 0 up until about 1000, was it BCE? No, post-Christian era anyway, about 1,000 years after the birth of Christ, if you believe in all that sort of thing. And it
Okay.
was something like 2/3, if not more, of the UK was heavily wooded forest of all different kinds. And there were bears, there were wolves, all the kind of stuff that we just can't picture. We see we see nature films about the northern United States. They've got grizzly bears and elk and stuff wandering about. And you think little tiny UK used to have bears and wolves and elk and all kinds of, not real wildlife, but big wildlife, dangerous creatures.
I consider that to be real wildlife.
No, but you know what I mean, though. What I'm saying, in the UK, we, apart from kind of deer, we don't have large animals roaming around the countryside willy-nilly,
No.
Whereas in the States and in parts of Eastern Europe still, there are wolves and bears and other large creatures. That's what the point I was trying to get across.
Well, in the UK, we're the most depleted country, aren't we, for wildlife?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, and to be fair, it's not surprising because we've been chopping down the trees since year dot, basically. And then that kind of expanded once we started building houses out of wood. And then we built the Royal Navy out of wood. So that even further depleted.
Our oak trees, wasn't it?
And it's interesting because people kind of blame us, as in this generation, for destroying everything. Well, in fact, we are partly responsible, but it's been going on for a long, 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 long time. So, we're not totally responsible, but it's just, the size of the country as well, because we're so small, the depletion looks to be way, way bigger. I mean, look at the Amazon. The Amazon is just incredibly massive, and it's been decimated, but it's still, from the air, it still looks huge. There's just so many, millions and millions of acres of trees and stuff. And I just find it find it ironic because they're kind of cutting down these trees in the Amazon for profit, but they're missing out on all the unknown potential cures for various illnesses and diseases, because so much of the stuff we use today to help people get over illnesses is based on plants or was discovered, like aspirin, for example. The idea for that came from the bark of a tree. I can't remember which one now. And there must be so much other stuff out there in the Amazon. Anyway, let's just stop for a second because we're talking about nature and trees and getting out into nature. We haven't really said why we're talking about it. Jenny, do you want to kind of introduce yourself and say who you are and what you do and where you're from? Because that will give viewers and listeners a better idea of what the hell we're talking about.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'm Jenny Bailey. I'm the co-founder and author of Tales from Mother Earth. We're a collective conservation venture. What it was, I wanted to do something in response to the climate crisis and in the response to the plight that our wild animals are in at the moment. And together with a team of people, we came up with the idea of developing a series of storybooks for children, but make them audio picture storybooks. So Mother Earth actually narrates the story to the child. And the target we're looking for is like the 3-year-olds, so very young, right the way up to about 10 or 11-year-olds. And what we've done in our book is we've put a story together of showing and depicting an animal or an insect in today's current times. So how it's coping in today's current times, and also, more importantly, in a way, what we can do to help it. So what we've done, and our first story that we've actually produced is called Phoebe the Bee, because back in 2019, I heard that bees were in serious decline across the world. And also the great naturalist himself, Sir David Attenborough, said that the Garden of Eden was no more. And that kind of propelled me to kind of go, I need to do something. I need to do something more than what we're already doing. So what we were already doing with my family, for instance, was doing beach cleans and putting nest boxes up in the woods and planting plants. But again, I needed to do something more. And by the very nature of taking action and doing something more, I felt better about myself and I felt better about our future because I was actually doing something. And I thought, if we can encapsulate that into a storybook for children that can empower them to help and show them the steps that they need to do to help, to get that feeling of empowerment, then we've done something really good. So that's how Tales from Mother Earth came about.
And the reason I've got you on the show today is because I talk a lot about mindset. And a lot of people worry about things that they can't actually control, like, for example, a meteor coming out of nowhere and blasting us back into the ice age.
Yeah,
But people actually worry about that, but there's nothing you can do about it. Conversely, people worry about the environment and climate change or the climate crisis, whatever you want to call it, but they don't do anything about it. And actually wrote a post yesterday, ironically, where I was talking about worry and saying to people, look, one way you can actually help yourself is by, if you're concerned about a specific subject like climate crisis, get out and do something about it, whether that's writing a letter to your MP,
that's right.
collecting litter, volunteering, and it will help you worry less and actually divert that energy into doing something positive.
That's exactly right. And that's the whole premise really of the book. And the message, I think, is coming from Mother Earth. So for a child, that's got a nurture and nature aspect to it as well. And maybe a slight authoritative aspect of Mother Earth's world, and we need to help her. And it's sharing a story about Phoebe the Bee that through her courage and determination. So there's a lot of mental elements in the book as well, and there's lots of morality and good feelings, because obviously it's a child's book, so it's going to end in a success. You know, she's going to be able to save the day. And that's a really good thing for a child to know as well, that through this process, all right, she's having a hard time because of the current climate, but things can improve and there's a positive outcome. So that needs to be put forward as well and stressed. So the stories that we're coming up with, whether it's a bee or whether it's a bird or whether it's another type of animal, like a mammal, for instance, like a hedgehog, it's like life is hard because they're coping in today's climate, and hedgehogs are actually on the red list to extinct list at the moment, which is unbelievable considering they're the nation's favourite mammal. But what happens through our stories is, you know, life is difficult, and it depicts the difficulty that animals actually having. And then through the process of us getting involved maybe in doing something to help, it alleviates some of that problem, and that animal can survive and thrive. And through us actually feeling empowered to help, we feel better, like exactly like you say.
Um, why are hedgehogs on the red list? What's causing them to be reducing their numbers so much?
I think traffic accidents. That's a big one. I think we're still taking out about 100,000 a year. But also the fact that, you know, we all need to be putting our hedgehog highways together, so putting small holes in our fences and our solid structures around our perimeters, so they can actually move around, because they can travel about 2 kilometers a night, and they have a desire to travel, to move, to find new areas, to find friends and that kind of thing, and they have to. And it's unfortunate, because if you have gardens, and they want to get into the gardens because they can help with the slugs and the snails and all that sort of thing, so they are quite a good thing to a good animal to have in your garden, good wildlife definitely. So they want to help, but they can't get into your gardens if you haven't allowed them in, if you haven't given them that access. And so the Hedgehog Highway, I don't know who came up with the idea, but it's like there's a lot of even organisations that are building houses these days, and then in their fences they actually leave a hole for the Hedgehog Highway, so the area has like a matrix of paths that are set out for hedgehogs.
That's a brilliant idea because it's such a simple thing. It's probably zero cost to the builder.
Yeah.
And also to people that like to have pristine gardens. Hedgehogs actually help you keep your garden pristine because they eat slugs and, like you said, other nasty creatures.
I mean, in all honesty, you've just hit on it really. If you want your garden to attract wildlife, the whole pristine element doesn't really go down that brilliantly. You know, nature needs a little bit of messy, a little bit of different textures, different structures. It needs some long grass every now and then. It needs some rotting wood that it can go and find some grubs on. It needs like a bug hotel. It needs, you know, the pristine element, and heaven forbid the astroturf that people are putting down in their gardens. That is what's really causing problems for our wildlife, and the bee included. And also going back to the bee, really, we're planting flowers that have no benefit for bees whatsoever.
That's what I was going to mention. I find it, when I don't find it, I just think it's bizarre that local councils spend all this money doing a really nice job of making areas like roundabouts and other aspects of it pretty by planting, colourful flowers, but they don't plant stuff that attracts wildlife like bees and other pollinators. Because where I live in Folkestone, you've got this long kind of walk area called the Leas,
Mm-hmm.
which is a lovely, lovely place to walk. And
Yeah.
there are about 3 or 4 big sections of planting that the council take care of and plant, but they plant things that just don't attract
Yeah.
bees
It's
and
like,
other pollinators. It's just really odd.
yeah, what they're planting is almost like the tropical shrub that are big, big impact, maybe a big flower, but nothing but for have nectar or pollen in at all.
Yeah, so it
Or
looks good. It looks pretty, but
exactly right, but it's
yeah.
no benefit to our wildlife at all. And slowly but surely, there's a lot of organisations like Plant Life, for instance, and I know the Kent Wildlife Trust, they're behind these sort of schemes. They've got bee roads, and I think also our council in Ashford Council or Kent County Council, I know they're getting behind some schemes as well. They've got Bee Plan. They're looking at roundabouts and verges, and they're planting them up with wildflowers to allow them to be more beneficial, especially for pollinators. And what they're doing is doing bee corridors and bee verges. So the bees and pollinators can actually have a corridor to the woods, for instance, or a corridor through the town. So that's what they're working on at the moment, and it's becoming a very successful project. But we do need to speak to a lot of other councils, because some councils are out there mowing so regularly, they're not allowing any of the clover or the daisies or the buttercups or the dandelions, which is, I mean, people see the dandelion as a weed, and I take issue with that, because that's why, in a way, we made dandelion Phoebe's favourite flower, because it's so packed full of nectar and pollen that the bees in particular need. All the pollinators need it, but it's like, let them grow. They are needed. I mean, a weed is surely a weed. I don't know how you interpret weeds, but surely isn't it a flower that you didn't want somewhere or something?
Yeah, a weed is basically a plant that doesn't fit your thing. But I was just thinking, you said dandelion. As a kid, I used to drink gallons of dandelion and burdock.
Okay.
It's like a lemonade, but it was
Yep.
made from dandelions and burdock. And yeah, it's bizarre. I don't understand why councils feel this urge to have to mow, on such a regular basis, because, especially in dry times, if it's really, really dry, why mow? Because nature will contain the grass for you anyway.
Well, the thing is, though, what they've said is they also get people calling them in and saying, I pay for my rates, and I want the gardens or the grounds to look neat and tidy. What's going on? So you've got to balance that up with wildlife's benefit and what we're all asking for. But I think really it's a process of education, isn't it? It's like, and there's signs out sometimes when you get sort of wildflower patches. It's like, pardon the weeds, I'm feeding the bees. The bees really need this right now, because they're in so much decline and they're in so much trouble. So it's an educational process right the way throughout all of generations, I think, at the moment, to let people know how important the bees are to us and the fact that we need to look after them. But what we're doing, sorry.
I was going to say, especially the older generation, because a lot of people don't realise how necessary bees are to our own survival.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. They are imperative. Every third forkful of food you put in your mouth, a bee has allowed it to get there through pollination. There's obviously other pollinators out there, but the bee really does wear the crown for doing the majority of the work. There is no doubt about it. And I mean, it was Einstein that said, and I don't want to be an alarmist or anything, but Einstein said, if bees go, we go 4 years later, because they provide us with so much. So we do have to be aware, and that's why, in a way, well, actually, National Geographic Society and Earthwatch have given the bee the title of the most important living species on this planet currently, and I think that got the title in 2019. And so, in a way, it felt right that Phoebe the Bee was the first book that we produced, and we're letting her fly a little bit more before we bring our second book out. But the bee is so important, and you're right, not a lot of people do realise that. I put a thing on social media the other day. I just said, do you realize how important the bees are? And do you understand why we're trying to save them? And I got a lot of messages saying, yes, we do, but I don't think other people do. So it really is an educational process that we all need to take part in a way, to inform people how important bees are. And also, I mean, a honeybee, for instance, can make a 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey in its lifetime. Now, if you think, the work it has to go to actually provide a 1/12 of a teaspoon, it's incredible. They're amazing insects, they really are. And also to do that, it needs to forage about 2,000 flowers a day. Now, when we go out to do school events, for instance, we talk to the children, engage with the children, and we ask them, who's got 2,000 flowers in your garden? And they look at us sometimes with blank faces, because, again, it's the right flowers at the right time that are going to help the bees. And the life cycle of a bee in the season, it's not that huge. So we need to do all we can. And also, we've got about 250 different types of bee in the British Isles. And I think it's about 90% of those are solitary bees. So there is a lot of education to help people and to understand how important bees are. And solitary bees we can all help by putting up bee hotels, and we can actually make them in our garden. And solitary bees go in there and they put some pollen in there, and they put some. Do you know the tube hotels that I'm
Yeah.
talking
They used to have them for, is it lace wings? There's a tiny ladybirds, like bamboo tubes with little
holes
in. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, it's just bamboo, like sticks of bamboo. And what actually solitary bees do, if they're not nesting in the ground and then they go to find the holes in the bamboo, is they'll climb in there, and they'll make a little area where they'll put some pollen and some nectar in there, and they'll also lay an egg in there, and then they'll seal it up, and it'll become a little cocoon.
Wow.
And it really does work as a maternity unit, because that happens in the spring and sometimes in the summer, and then that will last together in there. And what will happen, the little bee grub will develop, and then it will turn itself into a cocoon and stay there throughout the cold seasons. And then in the spring, where we are now, they'll start emerging as brand new little bees and go about their business.
I do miss having a garden, but it's strange, isn't it? Because there must be millions and millions of acres of land in the UK, particularly, that's part of a garden. And if you think that if everybody that owned a garden took even just a square meter and put a few logs on there and piles of leaves and just left it and forgot about it, you'd be helping so many species, sort of slow worms and snakes and amphibians and hedgehogs and all kinds of stuff.
Wildlife. You'd be helping wildlife in general. You really would, yes. And you don't need to do a lot. I mean, and that's why we said about Phoebe the Bee. If you've got a garden, fantastic. Plant some flowers that are really going to benefit the bees. Plant the lavenders and the foxgloves and all those plants that bees absolutely love. But also, if you've got like a balcony, you can put some do some pots and plant some flowers there as well. So some wildflowers in pots, and you can have your own wildflower patch on your balcony. Or even if it's just one flower pot at a time, you can do something which can benefit you, because in mental health wise, gardening is such a benefit to mental health.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You're planting something and it's going to grow and it's going to develop, and you're going to nurture it and look after it and see it form and see it bloom in time. And I think for children, that whole empowerment thing, that what we're trying to do, it's just a special thing for me, and it will be a special moment when children plant wildflower seeds, and then 3 to 4 months' time, those flowers will bloom, those plants will bloom, and the bees will come along, and the pollinators will actually, be taking the nectar and the pollen and going about their business. And that child can then witness what they've done, and the fact that their action has caused that benefit for that living life form that they're seeing right before their eyes. And I think if we can connect those together, and that child can take on that enormity in a way of what they've done, I think, Paul, that's a really good way forward for children to be connected with nature, and that's our mission.
Yes, I mean, if you can start, it's like anything, isn't it? If you can start someone off very, very young with a thing, whether it's learning to play the piano, whether it's planting a plant, if they're enjoying that thing, they're likely to carry that on throughout their lives. And
That's
so if you can capture kids and get them into gardening and planting and understanding wildlife, even if it's just 10% of those kids in the future carry that on, you're planting the seeds for future generations. I think that's brilliant. But I just want to come back to what you were saying about gardening and mental health. There are so many people living alone right now prior to lockdown, and lockdown has just kind of made that situation worse. And I think there could potentially be a mental health crisis coming very, very soon. One of the ways people can help themselves, if they can't actually get out and go for walks and stuff, if they've got a garden, it's just to get out in the garden and do stuff in the garden. If you haven't got a garden, it's to find a way. Even if you haven't got like a balcony, you might have a ledge.
Yes, I agree. Like a windowsill, plant something.
Plant something there, because again, it gets you back in contact with nature. You get your fingers dirty by planting the soil and planting seeds. I love seeds. I know we're going off topic a little bit here, but seeds, I find them incredible. You get this little tiny nut, little thing of nothing, and you put it in some soil, and you put a bit of water on it, and you kind of just leave it there, and then there's a little green shoot. And then it gets big. I just find this fascinating. A little green shoot, and then there's 2 shoots and 3 shoots, and before you know, there's a blooming great big plant there.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is amazing. And say if you're having, I don't know, tomatoes for lunch or something, then take one of those seeds and plant it. You can have a tomato plant growing, and an apple core, for instance. Or if you've eaten an apple, there's an apple. You can just pick up seeds. You don't have to necessarily go out and buy seeds. Seeds are in our fruits and vegetables, let's face it. So you can see the wonder of a plant growing and taking on that whole, like you say, from a seed to a plant, that whole process, and enjoy that process of growing something on your windowsill, on your balcony, in your garden, in your conservatory, on your desk. I mean, you can do that. You can be part of that process and enjoy it. Yes, definitely.
Absolutely. And bird boxes and insect hotels and all this, there are ways you can get a little bird box you can stick on your windowsill. There are ways, even if you don't have a garden, that you can kind of get involved and bring a little bit of nature to you.
There are indeed. Well, you can get bird feeders on the windowsills as well, can't you? Or on the glass of window, and they've got sucker, so they're on the outside, but they stick to the outside, and birds very once they've got used to it, that it's there and they found it, that they can become your friend, and you can get very good. You get up very close to them, because if your window pane's there and the bird's there, that's quite incredible.
Yeah, and just getting out for a walk. I mean, most towns have a park. Most towns have a patch of grass. Every town has got birds, whether they're the flying rats, as we call them down here, the seagulls. But I mean, I've noticed we've had the tree loppers around the streets, and I've noticed the blue tits and loads of sparrows are back.
That's good.
Just noticing the birds around town.
Well. They'll be looking for nest sites soon, so it's good that they've done the trees. The tree bit's done, so they won't have to do any more. I mean, it's fairly early, I guess, for nesting, but they will be prospecting areas soon. I've got a nest box up in my garden actually, and I buy nest boxes for people for gifts, especially if they're moving home and that kind of thing. I think it's a nice thing. And there's one that we've seen a couple of blue tits looking at, so that's quite fun. Who knows? But then also there's a telegraph pole just outside the house and down the road a little bit, and I can see it from my kitchen window, and there's a bit at the bottom of the telegraph pole where the metal connects to the wood, and there's a little gap there, and there's been a blue tit nesting in there for the last 2-3 years.
Oh yeah, it just reminded me of something. In the Lees, we were talking about in Folkestone.
Yes.
We've got these old-fashioned street lamps that go all the way along the Lees.
Yeah.
About 3/4 of the way up, I don't know why it's there, but there's a hole.
Okay.
And I've seen blue tits nesting in there. And I remember a couple of years ago, I was out and I was watching this blue tit flying backwards and forwards, actually feeding her chicks in the nest.
Lovely. Yeah. Lovely.
Just, nature finds a way.
It really does. Yeah, to coin a phrase, it really does. Yeah, and also with blue tits, I mean, my goodness, the timing is incredible, because when they actually do nest, and when those fledglings or the chicks actually hatch, it is an abundance at that point in time of caterpillars as well. Just incredible, the timing that collides. So those chicks have got lots of food to eat, because those parents, blue tits, have to work incredibly hard to feed their blue tits. It's thousands of caterpillars they get through. It's incredible.
Yeah, and again, if we're putting pesticides down or not making spaces for caterpillars to, well, for butterflies to actually do what they do, then again, there's going to be fewer butterflies, which means fewer birds, and it's like a perpetual negative cycle, isn't it?
But we can all do something about that, because we really shouldn't use any pesticides or weed killers or anything like that in our garden. Really try, please, not to use any chemicals in your garden. There's usually, like, you do like companion planting if you're into growing your veggies and that sort of thing. If you look at companion planting, there's usually a plant that you can plant with your prize carrots or your prize lettuces or something that would take the majority of the critters, if you like, to be on that plant, or it would sort of tell them in a certain way, give out a pheromone or something not to come near those plants. There's ways of doing it without chemicals, there really are. And the quicker we all cotton on to that. If we want to go weeding, hand weeding is the best. Or if we really want something that's stubborn, then it's boiling water. But no chemicals. It's just the world's worst. It really is. And the whole issue with the neonicotinoids debate, I mean, we've stopped it, I think, for this year being used, because it had been permitted, excuse me, at one point to be used on sugar beet seeds. But that's not happening now. But it was banned for a reason, and it's really quite dangerous stuff. And it goes into the food chain. It's soluble. It goes into the earth. And we need to keep our earth as fertile as possible to grow the crops that we need. And we need the crops to be as healthy as possible. And it's just in my opinion, it's a chain of destruction as soon as you start using the neonicotinoids.
What is that? Sorry to interrupt you. What is a neonicotinoid? It's the first I've heard of it.
Oh, right. Okay. Neonicotinoids fall off the tongue. It's a chemical insecticide that's used on big crops. It's made by the big chemical giants, and it's supposed to help plants thrive, I guess, and obviously not have the insects in them. But it kills the insects. It kills the bees. It kills the pollinators. It's one of the biggest problems, really, when it comes to bees in major decline at the moment. Pesticides is a big one. And because it's not necessarily something that we can all control, because it's out in the fields. It's the farming industry that needs to really think about this. But I have been talking to people recently, and there is a way whereby we can make the land more fertile without chemicals. And things are being developed, which is really quite exciting. And you can get the chemicals out of the land after a period of maybe about 2 years, something like that. There's people out there that are really working on this, because the neonicotinoids, it's like nicotine. It comes from that sort of group, and it gets to the nervous system of insects, and they die. But it also goes into our systems too. So it's bad stuff.
Yeah. I was about to say, I mean, there are lots of different ways to make your land more fertile. I mean, for example, the green manures and going fallow. That was a huge thing, wasn't it? You know, just leaving a field to do nothing for a couple of years and kind of rotating your crops and all that kind of thing.
Yeah. But I think there's been huge pressure on the farmers for yield, really, and I don't know that much about it, but the way I see it is, they're stuck wanting like fence to fence as much yield as they can possibly get for their crops. And they're doing monocrops, aren't they? So one field does, and really that whole crop rotation thing is more beneficial to the soil. So there's lessons, I think, to be learnt there. But I'm not an expert in farming, but I do know that, in my opinion, and I've spoken to a lot of people that look after bees and work in conservation, ecologists, and those group of people, and also the professors out there, really, that neonicotinoids is just very bad news for all of us. Because
you'd think we'd learn from the mistakes like in the Midwest in the States, where you've got all that flat land and it's now pretty much desert because they've over farmed it, and no matter what they do now, they just can't get anything to grow there anymore. It's just, almost like desert.
Well, I was talking to somebody the other day, and she's actually going to work out in Africa to help with that sort of situation as well, because the soil is arid. And once the soil becomes arid, the fertility of the soil diminishes massively, and it's very difficult to grow anything, and then the topsoil will get blown away. And for our biodiversity, soil is the foundation. Soil is everything. So if we don't get the soil right, we can't build on it at all, and we can't plant things that we want to plant. Soil is the first building block. So it's paramount, really, that we work on soil and we get it right. That came to my interest probably about last year sometime, when I was talking to some people about the benefits of soil and how important it is. And I understand it. It makes sense, doesn't it, really, that it's the building blocks of what everything else goes on.
Well, if your soil's no good, you can't grow any crops or trees or plants or anything. And it just brings to mind a video I watched a couple of weeks ago about a massive experiment that's going on in Central Africa, where they've got the massive desert. And to try and stop the desert sort of expanding, they're looking at different trees they can plant that will
hold back
the desert, but also hold back the earth, keep the earth in its place, but also can provide nutrients to the soil as well, so they can actually plant other crops around the trees.
And it's working, isn't it? It's incredible. I mean, they're doing a lot in Africa at the moment. They're doing the Great Green Wall, which is incredible, where they're actually planting trees across the whole of the country, which is a vast project, and I just think it's fantastic. And that will, like you say, it will bind the earth together. It will, as soon as you grow anything in the land, and it takes in the land, then you're bringing more nutrients back to the earth. And there's that network that's being connected underground that's so important. So yeah, that's a really, really great thing, because obviously a lot of flooding was happening over there, and the land was becoming arid and it was getting blown away, and it has been turning to desert. I think the Sahara Desert's encroaching and just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And in a way, they're planting trees across that area, and they can tend them, and they can look after them. There's enough people behind the project that can make it happen. Then, a green land is so much better than a desert. And also it will be cooler as well. A green land is so much cooler than a desert, and it's incredible how a green area versus a desert can be so much cooler, purely because of the fact it's green.
And if they can make this project work and make it really successful, they can actually then kind of expand backwards into the desert and start reclaiming some of that land, and say bringing the temperature down, having more trees. And we all need trees, because obviously trees, great oxygen, they absorb CO2 and all this kind of stuff.
Oh, we need so much at the moment. I mean, we really do. We need seagrass as well. I mean, and kelp. That's another thing that absorbs heap loads of carbon dioxide. I mean, the sea is 70% of the planet, and the sea also gives out a lot of oxygen as well. So, there's reactions that are going on all the time, that have been going on all the time, that we've kind of got in between and messed up a little bit, and we just need to work in harmony more with nature. That's it in its simplistic form. I know it's much more complex than that. What with dwindling habitats and plastic pollution and climate change, it's much more complex. But that's the goal I think we all need to be striving for. And with our books, going back to our books, as we've said, we're teaching children to respect, to love nature. And that's got to be the first point, because if people don't respect and love it, how are they meant to protect it? How are they meant to understand that it needs protection if they don't really understand what it's about, what it can do, and the benefits that we can all gain from that? And I don't mean that's a selfish point of view, because obviously there's benefits for the wildlife and us. But the thing is, it's fundamental. If someone doesn't know anything about it, then they're not going to protect it.
I actually think, though, you've hit on something there, because if we are selfish in the right kind of way, we'll then start to realize how important all this stuff we've been talking about is for our survival. Because let's be honest here, if the human race manages to destroy itself, planet Earth will be fine, because I reckon planet Earth has got another 40 billion years of existence. And so if we destroy ourselves, in a couple, like the dinosaurs died out, it was quiet for a while, and then eventually we came along. If we destroy ourselves, it'll be quiet for a while, and then, plant life on the earth, so we'll regenerate, and something else will come along. So we need to be selfish, because if we as human beings want to survive, we have to do all this stuff we've been talking about, because the earth, Mother Earth, is going, listen, guys, sod you lot. I've given you the best. You've mucked it up. Bye-bye. End of the human race. Thank you very much. Thanks. Was it goodbye and thanks for all the fish?
I think if you look at evolution, we've been on the earth, is it 2 seconds?
Yeah.
Something like that.
That amount of time.
Yeah,
literally,
exactly.
I can't open my fingers wide enough.
No, you're absolutely, it is. It's touching very close. It's 2 seconds. It's gone like that. It really is. So, I mean, I guess there's 2 ways of being selfish, because in a way we have been selfish. We've gone out there and we've plundered the resources, the minerals, the goodness, if you like. We've plundered it and continue plundering it. So, we now need to stop in our tracks. And I think the pandemic, in a way, has taught us that, which is amazing in some respect, that it's come from nature and it's kicked our butt quite a lot. And we've all had that moment to stop in our tracks to reevaluate and reassess. And I think, in a way, that's been a good thing, although it's been a tragic thing. But we were going off in the wrong direction, and we were stampeding, I think, in the wrong direction to that point where we couldn't come back from. And I think this has given us a chance to build back better, to build back more in harmony with nature, to consider our actions, hopefully, and to have a more of a global plan of action. And I mean, who knows what's going to be discussed at COP26, for instance, in November. I mean, I want there to be some action. It's like they've talked and they've all been shaking hands and everything's very good and aren't we doing great, like the Paris one. But there needs to be some action that comes out of this. Talking is, I mean, we were saying 2 years ago that it's 10 years, weren't we? We were saying we've got 10 years to kind of turn this around. And but that's another thing I guess we need to discuss as well, the fact that children get climate anxiety. I mean, that is a real thing as well, because of that narrative that they've been hearing. Children are saying, well, what's the point in education if there's not going to be a world to go and use my talents and use my services when I'm out of school, for instance. I've had that from my children. It's just like, what's the point, Mum? Because we've screwed this up so much. And how can we get through this? And I kind of say, well, we've got to get through this, and you've got to get educated so you can help the future.
I actually think there's a point that will come, because this is what happens with the human race. Our backs go up against the wall, and then we suddenly think, hang on a minute, we've got to sort this out. And then we kind of start sorting it out.
I hope so.
I think that will happen. But the problem with that is that it will be too late for a lot of species.
Yeah.
Sadly. Yeah. Because we'll go, hang on a minute, this is going to, we can see now we've got 5 years. Okay, right. So we better start doing something now. And then action will be taken. But I believe that what you're doing and people like you doing is it's at the grassroots level. Because if you get, like we talked about the soil is the foundation. If you can get the soil right, if you can get the soil with the right intentions and the right vibe and the right desire to take action, that will filter upwards. Because, governments only get voted in if they're going to do what the people want, allegedly. So if we have this mass rise of people saying, look, we've got to stop cutting down trees, we've got to, start planting plants that are good for bees, more bee corridors, more hedgehog highways and all this.
Yeah.
Then the governments will go, hang on a minute, if we want to be voted in, that's what people want. They don't want, we don't want more factories, we want more green spaces, we want more productive with a small p.
It's quite short-sighted, I think, when it comes to the government, because obviously it's their 4 years, isn't it? And they're looking at that opportunity around the corner. But you're right. It is. It has to come to that foundation. But I was also speaking to somebody the other day, and he was saying with the human race, it's like they need a certain amount of pain for things to change. And he was saying to me that in his opinion, and he's a professor, I think. He was saying that he doesn't think there's enough pain yet. And I was just really going, seriously? I mean, how much more pain do we need? But the good thing, I think, at the moment is we are in a state of change at the moment. There are opinions being changed. There are new developments being looked at, and the greener options are really coming through, which is fantastic. It just needs to be developed and be put in place a little bit quicker, I think.
I don't know about the speed of it, but I think the intentions will start to change, because if it's profitable, they'll do it, the big organizations. So if there's a move towards greener things, I was reading a post the other day about a business, a small business. They make breakfast cereal.
Yeah.
And they've been going 7 years. They've got a turnover of about £9.5 million, but their goal is to be the number 2 in the cereal world in the UK and further out. Is a way of encouraging the bigger players to do things. Like, for example, they managed to reduce their wastage of plastic by about 50 tons in a year. And they kind of publicize this and everything else. And the big boys went, wow, if they can do that, we should be doing that. So the bigger, like Kellogg's as an example, saw what this smaller group were doing. We better do that as well. So they went out and they saved 500 tons. And I think this is how
it will come through.
It will come through by companies coming in, going, yeah, we want to make money. We want to have make a profitable company, but we want to have a proactive impact. So let's see how we can make X, but take out all the other stuff we don't need, and save stuff and be carbon neutral, and not even carbon neutral, but carbon negative, if that's the right phrase.
It's like, yeah. I mean, that's what's come in recently, hasn't it? The whole corporate social responsibility, which is a leap in the right direction. It really is, in sustainability.
And everybody can do their bit to get the company to do this by buying or not buying, depending on what the big organization is doing, because they can't force you to buy stuff. You can go to a supermarket and there's 6 different breakfast cereals, and you can find the breakfast cereal for the one company that's doing its best to be carbon negative and, help the environment. Then that's the breakfast cereal to buy.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Yeah.
Then the other players are going, hang on a minute, we're losing sales because, this fellow over here is doing X, Y, and Z. We need to be doing it. And that will expand.
That's how it works. It takes time, but it is consumer demand. And we can all vote with our pockets, can't we?
Absolutely.
Who we actually go and work with, and who we buy from, even who we bank with. And there's ethical banks out there these days, and people are actually changing, because the transparent element of, we want to know where our money is going now, what is it going into. We want ethical products, and we want ethical values, really, because if that's our values, we want to show that value in our in what we're spending and how we're saving and everything. We just want that straight across the board. So opinions are changing, which is exciting. In some respects, it's a very exciting time to witness this, and it is good. It just needs to happen a little bit faster.
Well, I don't know if it's going to happen any faster, but it is happening. And this is, again, coming back to the grassroots and the soil, because it takes no extra effort for a person to go to a supermarket and, using the breakfast cereal analogy, and to actually buy this breakfast cereal, and which does a bit to save the planet, as opposed to that breakfast cereal, which is doing nothing. And that's how the message, because more and more people start to do that, it costs them nothing. It takes less effort.
Yeah, but then it's down to their PR and marketing to tell the world that they're doing that.
Well, that's what they're doing, yeah.
Exactly. They need to share that with us, so then we're aware, and then consumers can be consumer aware, really. We can know where we're going to be spending our money and the reasons why. I mean, sometimes with doing the right thing, we're doing the wrong thing, which is really confusing because it's so complex at the moment. Like, take palm oil, for instance. I mean, it's in practically everything, and I'm always trying to avoid it. But now there's also sustainable palm oil, which changes it slightly as well.
Yeah, it's bizarre. It's like palm oil is a really good example. It's not good for us. It's not good for the environment.
No.
So why have sustainable palm oil? I guess it's because the people that live in that area they need to make a living. And so if you kind of say no more palm oil, then they're all without a job. So there's a balance. That's the challenge.
It is.
Let's ban palm oil, because then you're going to put thousands of people out of work.
That's right, and that's their livelihood, and they're in that country that there isn't a lot of options for other livelihood, and obviously they need, that they need to make money to live.
Yeah, so you have to have the balance, and But again, us as buyers, as consumers, we can influence that by saying, yeah, okay, I'll have the sustainable palm oil, please, or I'll have the fair trade coffee or the fair trade wine or
That's
whatever.
right. Yeah.
Because then you still get a nice bottle of wine, but you know that the money isn't going to the end, the wholesaler. It's going to the people out that are growing the wine and their employees.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of schemes like that these days. So you can be very consumer savvy, can't you? Like I said, you can really choose where you wish to spend, and knowing that there's an ethical bias in your purchasing, it's a good thing for us. It makes us feel better as well.
And that's the whole thing of coming back to about being selfish, because if you feel it makes you feel better doing this little thing that costs you no effort, the impact on that is like the old chaos theory of the butterfly and the hurricane. If one person does it and 1,000 people do it and 1,000,000 people do it, that has a huge effect. I'll give you a really simple example. I am part of a group called Friends 500, and it's a charity. We give £1, each of us give £1 every single month as a group. So that's, my £1 is nothing, is it? But there's 500 of us, so that's £500 every single month that goes to people that are in really, really bad situations in this country and elsewhere. And that's just a really good example of how a tiny, tiny little contribution from one person put together with lots of other tiny contributions has a huge impact.
Yes, that's right. Well, and one person, I believe, really can make a difference as well. So.
And I think that's the education. It's the fact that a lot of people go, oh, I'm just one person, I can't do anything. Well, yeah, maybe on your own you can't change the world, but you can donate £1. You can buy this bottle of wine instead of that bottle of wine, and, cascade effect. So don't think that you can't change the world by yourself. You can change the world as part of a conglomerate, a massive group, as a community. You're the soil again.
That's right. But also in being that one person that starts things, you can change the world of being one person. I mean, there's inspirational stories out there that I'm telling my children all the time. And when we go and do our workshops with children, we're telling them. So, you can. Don't ever think that you're just one person and you can't make a difference, because you can. Even one person planting wildflower seeds for a bee is making a difference to that life form. And that's what I want children to understand when they're planting those wildflowers, and when they see those bees come along, the fact that through their efforts, that insect has benefited greatly from them doing what they've done. And you could say it's a symbiotic relationship in some respects, because that bee wouldn't be having its nectar and pollen if it wasn't for that child planting those flowers and those seeds. And as soon as children can understand that and take that on, that their actions have really created something really quite special. We need to perpetuate that. We need to tell more children about that. And actually, every book that we're selling at the moment actually comes with a big packet of wildflower seeds, which is just fantastic. It completes the story in that way. But also, great. One of my favorites is there's a guy in Indonesia, and I don't know if you've heard of him. It's in Marjuli Island. And I heard about this and I looked it up, and it's actual fact. It's just an incredible story. He saw his area, his homeland, kind of being washed away with the floods and that sort of thing, and it was turning to arid soil and desert, and it just wasn't like it used to be, which for him was green and lush and lovely. So he started planting trees, and he carried on planting trees. Every day he went out and planted as many trees as he could. And then he cultivated those trees and got the seeds and grew more trees. He's actually got a rainforest now, and it's a true story. And
I've seen it.
And the land is saved. And he's called the man of the trees or something in Indonesia. And it's an incredible story. But he just went, enough is enough. I'm seeing my whole land where my house is built getting washed away, getting flooded, and it's because there's no greenery here. So I'm going to do something. And he did something, and now he's got all the wildlife you can imagine coming to his rainforest and benefiting from it. Unfortunately, you've also got poachers trying to take the trees as well, which is not a good thing. So he has to obviously secure and protect his area as well. But he's got a rainforest full, and I just think that's incredible. There's also another story about one guy looked at the beach. I think again could have been in Indonesia, and it was piled high with plastic and rubbish. And he started picking up rubbish. And one person became 4 people, and 4 people became 10 people, and it grew and grew. And before they knew it, had 2,000 people on that beach collecting the rubbish. And that beach is pristine now. And they've had sea turtles nesting on there, and they haven't been there for something like 200 years.
Wow.
Isn't it incredible?
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of stories like that. One springs to mind is the boy in Africa who's, I think the well dried up or something in his village, and they were going to do something really drastic engineering wise to try and bring water in. And he came up with a very, very simple design using bits of a bicycle to build a windmill. And that actually brought the water up from this deep well, and they're able to grow crops again. And some big organization in the States found out about what he'd done, and they brought him over to the States to go to college and university where he's doing an engineering degree, and he's now going to go back to Africa to use the skills that he's learned to do more of what he's done. It's,
fantastic.
There are lots and lots of these individual stories out there, and you might think to yourself, well, I'm not an engineer, I don't have this idea or that idea. It doesn't matter. You can still donate your £1, or you can still plant your 1 tree or your 1 plant on your balcony.
Yes, exactly.
You don't have to be the one that has the inspiration. You can be part of the thing that plants the 1 tree or the 1 plant, or that can has a little bit of garden, and all this kind of stuff. Absolutely, yeah.
Wasn't it Anne Frank that came up with that amazing and beautiful statement about, isn't it wonderful that no one has to wait a minute to help the world or something? It was along those lines. No one has to wait a minute to make the world a better place, or something like that. But it's saying the same thing as what we're looking at, and it is. It's amazing. I wish I knew that statement completely right, actually, her quote. But
you have to Google it. You have to Google it.
I'll have to Google it. Yeah.
But it's true that it's not just in the subject that we're talking about. It's about everything. If you're, struggling, there is a way out, and it's, you just got to do a little bit. People say, well, I can't grow, I can't learn, I don't have this. But, 1%, everybody can improve 1% every single day.
Do you know what I did the other day? I do this Facebook group, Mother Earth and Me, and it really is a group for conservation tips, ideas and stories, where people can come together, because we can all learn from each other. And somebody put a clip on there the other day, or just a picture of plants growing out of eggshells. And I just thought, right, okay, I'm going to give that a go. So I did an omelette or whatever for the boys the other night, and I've kept the eggshells, and now it's on my windowsill. And I've planted a few, I've got the eggshells, or I've got like 3 half eggshells, and I've got some earth in there. And now I've got some wildflower seeds that I've put in there. And it's like, and I put it back on the post, and I went, day 1, let's see what happens. And I'm excited because I'm watering them every day, and they're in the eggshells. Because what you do when it grows is you put the whole eggshell in the ground. So you don't need a plant pot as such.
Yeah, because obviously the eggshell is biodegradable. So at some stage it will just go back into the earth.
And it's got all the nutrients in it that soil is going to need to develop those seeds. So you're right. Anybody can have a go. Anyone can have a go. And like we say, in fruits and vegetables that we're all eating. I used to, when I was a kid, I used to cut the carrot tops off and have them on the windowsill and let them grow. I remember, I think my granddad taught me to do that.
Avocado.
Simple childhood.
I love avocados. I haven't eaten them for a while, but I think it was last year I went through a spate of trying to grow avocado, and I got one to go about this high.
Wow.
And then it just died on me. I don't know what happened with it. It just had enough. So I'd done loads and loads and loads and loads of them, and nothing happened at all. Not even a little sprout, or not even a little root. And then this, I had 2 that started, the roots started to grow. One of them, it didn't grow a sprout out of it. It just grew roots. And then, the roots grew and grew and grew, and nothing else happened. And the other one, the roots grew, and there's a little shoot, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger. It was tiny. It was like thinner than a pencil. And it got to about this high.
Goodness.
And then it just stopped. It just collapsed. It just had it. And I don't know what happened. But I'm going to do... This conversation has kind of prompted me to go and get some avocados. I love avocados anyway.
Give it a go.
Give it a go.
One. You must let me know how you get on. We do that with peppers sometimes, like sweet peppers. We eat a lot of peppers and cucumber and that kind of thing. And there's always seeds, isn't there? There's so many seeds in a pepper. So we sometimes plant those as well, and then see what happens. So
Apparently, you can do
Yeah,
that with pineapple as well, can't you? If you lop the top
you
off the
can do that with
pineapple,
pineapple. Yeah, yeah, you can.
see what
And
happens.
there's a load of hacks actually, isn't there, on YouTube of people growing from seeds of fruits and vegetables. And pineapple is definitely one. Um, avocado I've seen before, and then actually someone grew a pineapple one where it comes up and there's a stem and it's literally got a pineapple on the end of it.
Oh wow!
I mean, it's mind blowing, really. Yeah, yeah. But all your fruits and vegetables. I mean, I love growing. I know it's going to be slightly different, but I love growing potatoes in sacks. I just think there's nothing better than starting a potato in a sack and then. Have you heard of that before?
No, what's this?
Okay, well, you get a potato, put it in the bottom of the sack. Usually the Hessian sacks are good.
Yeah.
And then put earth on it, and then the shoot will come up, and you put earth on it. The shoot will come up, earth on it, right the way up to the top of the sack, and then let it flower. And then, with potatoes, you can kind of let them die. And then what you do is break the sack, and you've got a sack full of potatoes.
Oh wow, that's a brilliant idea.
So it's
I
amazing.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you obviously you let it flower, so obviously the pollinators come along and do their bit as well, and then let the plant die, and then literally you can just dig around and take out as many potatoes as you need. The whole sack will be full of potatoes.
Yeah, and potatoes are easy to grow because everybody's done this. Had a bag of potatoes in the cupboard, forgotten about them,
They've gone
and then they suddenly start sprouting everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's when you put them in the sack. Yeah, there's like you were saying earlier, the value and the beauty of a seed, a tiny seed that can develop. It's a little miracle in itself, really, isn't it? It
Oh
really
yeah,
is. And then it gives back with more seeds and fruit, and it is incredible. And it doesn't take that much time, and it doesn't take that much care necessarily on our part either. Put it in a shady spot or a sunny spot or whatever it needs. Just keep it watered, um, and you'll get something, won't you? And you'll be very lucky.
absolutely. I love aloe vera plants, and I had a massive one in my front, but I think it caught a chill and it died. So I put the pot under my kitchen table and just forgot about it. I went to look at it the other day, and there's about 4 little sprouts coming up.
Oh, wow.
There's 4 little shoots coming up. So it's actually obviously, I've neglected this thing completely. I haven't watered it or anything, but it's starting to grow again. So this is the whole thing about nature taking over. Look at all these ancient ruins that have been found in forests in places like Indonesia. I forgot. There's a big one. I forgot the name of it now. Angkor Wat. I think, is that it? Angkor Wat, is that the one?
Okay, no, I'm not
Anyway,
sure.
there is a big temple that they found in Indonesia, which is thousands of years old, but is actually covered in forest. And the point I was trying to raise was that nature will always find a way. I live in the centre of Folkestone, and I live in a row of kind of Victorian houses, and across to my left there's a big row of houses. On the top of one of those houses there's a tree growing. There's a bush. I don't know what it's, a buddleia or something. It's massive.
Amazing.
I mean, buddleia, as an example, was imported to this country from Japan about 100 years ago, and it's now classified as a weed in some place. Because if you go into London on the train, as you start arriving in London, there are massive buddleia trees alongside the track everywhere you go. And it grows in bridges and all kinds of things.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's great for bees and butterflies.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, they love it. So same with lilac as well. I mean, it just go down so well with them. So yeah, hopefully they won't take it all down and cut it all down, because it does. It just grows wild, doesn't it? And it's lovely to see
it just grows back anyway. So if they cut it back, it just grows back. It's like the trees out here. They've cut them. They haven't removed the trees, but they've taken all the shoots out. And they look a bit right now, but within a year or so, the shoots will be back up again, and it'll be fine.
Yeah, that's good.
And that I don't mind that, because it's managing the trees. Obviously, if you leave the trees to do their thing, they're going to impact on the houses. So by just taking the shoots off the top and leaving the tree, the shoots will grow back, and it's a nice compromise.
Yeah, and the tree will get stronger as well.
Yeah. So, absolutely.
No, I love trees. I think trees are just incredible. And do you know they have a heartbeat as well?
I didn't know that.
It beats once a day. And I don't know if you've read that book about the fact they communicate with each other and they can heal each other too. I mean, it is fascinating, the world, the wood wide web, as they called it.
Is that because it's the heartbeat when it's chucking up water to the top or something?
I'm not quite sure, in all honesty. I need to read a little bit more about it, but it was just mesmerizing to think that a tree has a heartbeat, and it does go very slowly. I think they said it was once per day, but also the communication aspect. If there was a tree that's next to another tree and that tree's not too well or diseased, that tree would try and help it in some way, which
Wow.
it's just amazing. It's just fascinating. It really is.
Have you done any studies on mycelium, fungi? There's a guy called Paul Stamets, and I've been reading some of his books, and it's just incredible. There's this area in the northwest of the United States, and it's actually the biggest living thing on the planet. There's like thousands of square miles of this mycelium thing growing underground.
Wow. Yeah. No, I hadn't heard that. Goodness.
Oh, you need to look it up. Paul Stamets.
Paul Stamets.
Guy, he's an amateur, whatever they're called, that looks into fungi. I can't think of the term, but he's world renowned because he's spent the last 20, 30, 40 years studying fungi, and he's discovered this massive living thing. And they do the same thing. They communicate. They they interconnect. It's fascinating. There's so much we don't know about the stuff that's around us. It's just phenomenal.
Yep, I agree completely. And going back to the fungi stuff, that's the stuff that's helping the soil become more fertile as well. The mycorrhizal fungi, I think it's mycorrhizal fungi. That's the stuff. That's the really good nutrients that's needed in the earth, and that's doing great things as well for fertility of the soil.
Yeah, I mean, mycelium. There's so much potential in the whole range of the sort of the fungi world, as it were, that we're just not using. They've actually done these. I've seen these demonstrations where they get wood chips that have been impregnated with a kind of mycelium, and they've put it onto land that's been poisoned by oil. You're like a road haulage area, where they had lots of diesel spills and stuff. And within the space of a few months, the oil's been eaten and converted into the wood chips turn into soil and land, and plants start growing. It goes all green.
Wow.
Unbelievable. And Paul Stamets has got videos out there on YouTube you can find where he's done tests with different types of mycelium and different pollutants or polluted areas, and they completely just clean them up.
That's incredible.
It's just unbelievable what this stuff can do. Wow. It's phenomenal.
Wow. I'm loving the sound of that.
Look him up, Paul Stamets. He's incredible.
Out of the land.
Yeah, he's an incredible person. Really, really is. Anyway, listen, I've been chattering for a long while now. I'll let you get on. Jenny, where can people reach out? Where can people buy the book?
Online. Just pop onto our website, which is talesfrommother.co.uk. Go to the shop. You can actually also hear a snippet and a short audio snippet of Mother Earth actually narrating the story. I've got a copy of it here. So this is our book, and it's for a 3 to a 10-year-old. And there's a puzzle in there, and there's fun facts, and there's a colouring in picture. So what we've done is, obviously there's the conservation message in there, which is so important as well, and the story. But what we've actually done is put a lot of extra stimulus in the content of the audio and also in the book to really keep a child active and learning in a positive way throughout those years, really, from 3 right the way through to a 10 or 11-year-old.
Don't worry if you didn't catch that. I'll obviously post the links in the show notes. Okay. Listen, Jenny, one question before you go. I ask kind of most people this that come on the show. If you could go back in time and change anything in your life, would you? And if the answer is yes, why?
Ooh.
I love to stump people.
I don't think I would.
No pressure.
I don't think I would.
No?
Because every experience that you've gone through has created who you are today. I know I found my passion and my soul in my work now with Tales from Mother Earth. There's a team of 5 of us that I've put together. So myself, the composer, the narrator, our story editor, and our amazing illustrator. And really that's a new thing. We're only a fledgling of a venture, really, because we came together in 2000 2019 and literally launched last year in 2020. But from all the experiences I've had in my life through to where I am now, it's brought me to where I am now, and there's a reason for that. So in all honesty, no, I think the best is yet to come.
Brilliant. Listen, Jenny, I really appreciate your time today. We've been chatting for more than an hour. Thank you so much for coming on, and I will speak to you soon.
It's been a total joy, Paul. Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye now.
See you later. And let me know how you go with your avocados.
I will do.
Okay.